Welcome to the Kindness Project, the podcast designed to share stories of kindness and share how kindness can make positive change in our world, one small act at a time.
This time on the Kindness Project, Dungeon Master, creative campaigns, and we talk a little bit about being kinder to yourself.
Welcome, my friend. That was a weird start. Welcome, my friends, to another episode of the Kindness Project. I'm joined by my very own D&D aficionado. It's Charlotte Dames.
And I'm joined by a man who says he wants to play D&D and has had 4 years to do it, but still hasn't managed to get the game going.
No. Help me understand D&D. And if you're not sure what D&D is, listeners,
Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, I thought it was Death and Destruction. I got the wrong game. No, Dungeons and Dragons.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Right, help me understand the appeal of D&D.
D&D was one of the, I think it was one of the original tabletop RPG.
You're throwing a lot of,
tabletop
acronyms. It's a tabletop game.
And a role.
Hold on.
A tabletop role-playing game.
It's not. Yeah, no, it might be one of the original tabletop role-playing games, but board games, tabletop games have been around for thousands of years.
It's one that has immersive storytelling, and it's brilliant. So in my mind, it's brilliant. So you have one person who kind of controls the story, tells the story, plays through the other characters, sets the monsters and the battles and the dungeons and all this stuff.
And you normally play the Dungeon Master.
I usually go with the Dungeon Master.
I don't blame you being the Dungeon Master, but in my mind, I mean, clearly you're going to be pretty good at that role, but there's only one true Dungeon Master in my mind. I mean, you are amazing. I love you. You know what I'm going to say, don't you? Yeah, there's only one true Dungeon Master in my mind, and that is Treyguard from Nightmare. I mean, that I grew up with just the ultimate Dungeon Master.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. But, I try my best.
Yeah.
And
have you got a beard?
Let me rearrange my
hair. So Charlotte is now putting her hair around her chin. That is weird how beard-like that looks. Yeah. Honest, right, let me just take a photo so we can put this in conjunction. Right, do me a favour, listeners, right? Do me a favour, right? Right, now, what I want you to do, listeners, genuinely, is go to the show notes for episode 100. What episode are we on?
I don't know.
114, right? And on those show notes, it will show a little picture. And that picture will be of a girl. Or some sort of bearded wizard.
It's not usually the role I play.
Now my phone has said, because you've put this beard up, my phone has just automatically told me to pick a better shot. No, I want the one with the beard, thanks. I want the one with the beard.
I love being the Dungeon Master because it means essentially I get to control the entire game.
Right.
So I get to write the stories for the game. Yeah. I get to lead the characters.
You get to pretend you got a beard.
Yeah, I get to lead the characters through the game. So at any point, if I decide, okay, that was clever, I didn't have that in mind, but that was clever, I can automatically give them points and say, yes, that was good. But if I think, okay, they're playing the game wrong, I can take points away, or I can lead them in a certain direction, because it doesn't really matter because I'm in control of the game. So
is there a framework you've got to follow?
Fight monsters, earn XP.
But
not really.
But can you take it wherever you want to?
You can take it wherever you want to. Okay. And you
But there's a story, right? You start with the story.
Yeah, well, you can write your own story.
Okay.
So I have a book that has a pre-written story, but I've also endeavoured to try and start my own story. So while we're working through this campaign, I'm currently writing a murder mystery campaign for my party to work through. So they have to kind of solve all the mysteries, and at the end they get to fight the murderer and, defeat the murderer, and then they get out, and then it's just about how many of them survive. And I've said to them that if less than 5 people die, they each get a special item as a reward, but you can take it anywhere you like, really.
That sounds amazing. So you're making your own murder mystery Dungeons and Dragons game.
Yep.
But no dragons.
No dragons.
Set in what era?
I was.
Is it like Poirot? Was it Agatha Christie inspired?
Well, no, because I listened to it to get inspiration for the campaigns that I've planning to write, because it's my first campaign that I'm writing myself. I was listening to a lot of the D&D podcasts online, like Critical Role or The Adventure Zone or Dungeons and Daddies. I haven't got around.
Dungeons and Daddies.
It's a group of fathers and they all get together to play Dungeons and Dragons together. I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, but it's supposed to be really good.
Okay.
But I've been listening to stuff like Critical Role and The Adventure Zone, mostly The Adventure Zone, and
it helps you create your own.
Yeah, and
stories.
I listened to one. They were doing a mystery, and there was only one murder. But I decided I was going to write a plot that was linking with. Now that I know you can do murder mystery, I was going to link it to and then there were none. So I've decided there's 12 characters, and they're just going to get killed off one by one until my party solve who the murderer is. If they don't solve it, they get killed off, and they have to rewrite their entire characters and start from scratch.
I bet.
And they lose all their levels and all their items and all their stuff. But it's gonna be great.
Love it. Amazing. Sounds good. So when's that going to be written for?
After GCSEs.
Yeah. That sounds like a brilliant thing. Because again, you can write the
I can
core.
literally do anything.
Yeah, you can do anything you want.
You can have party sizes of up to 10. Obviously, my party's only 2 people, but they work really well together. But even though they work well together, but they have very opposing.
When you say party, you've got two other friends you play D&D.
Yes.
You should start your own Dungeons and Dragons. What's your gang called? Baggy Trousers.
Oh, the Baggy Trousers split up ages ago.
Oh no.
Yeah, we don't really. They took away our bench.
How dare they?
I know.
How dare they take away the Baggy Trouser bench?
They took it away at the start of last year, so it's just.
We haven't spoken about the Baggy Trousers for ages, have we?
Since the 12th episode.
You did hide the information that they'd pinched your bench, though. How dare they? You need to start you need to get your organisational skills in play to get a few more D&D players, I reckon.
Well, no, the 2 I've got for right now is fine because they're a rowdy bunch and I only have room for 2 on this spare sofa, so it's
Well, why don't you steal the bench and put it in our little den, and then you'd have room for 2 more?
Maybe.
Do you need more seats down there? Because we can arrange.
No, it's fun with our little game of 3, and we all have snacks. And last time Kaylee brought fruit.
Yeah.
Fruit.
And then Mummy cooked some of them dinner, and then they said they didn't want it, didn't they?
Yeah.
No time. Anyway, this week, talking of food, this week's question of the podcast is food related.
Yes.
And it is weird food combinations. What are you singing to yourself?
Unbreak My Heart.
Why?
It was on a show I was watching earlier. It's just been stuck in my head.
Yeah. Talking of that, we'll get back to the podcast in a minute. But talking of that, yesterday you went to see The Voice live, didn't you?
We're not allowed to talk about it.
Are you not allowed to talk about The Voice?
We're allowed to talk about it in general. We're not allowed to talk about what happened.
Tell me about the experience. What was it like?
It was absolutely brilliant because when we got there at 10. Well, we got there at 10:30.
What time did you get there?
We left the house at 10 and we got there at 10:30. And then... No, did we get there at 10:30? I don't know. I don't know when we left. No, we left at 8 and we got there at 10:30.
Yeah, because it's over the other side of London, isn't it?
And then we were standing in line until 12:30.
You're not selling it to me. You are not selling it to me.
We got into this giant tent and they did bag checks and security checks and they patted us down and they got us through and we stood in this tent for about 10 minutes. And
there seems to be a lot of standing and queuing at the minute.
And we got snacks and we got drinks and we had to pay for them, obviously. But
right.
And there was a shiny...
When does the good bit start?
There was a giant shiny chandelier in this tent. It was absolutely brilliant. And the tent was heated. And then it started hailing it down. It was absolutely brilliant. And then we started all going outside.
Right. Can I just give you a little tip when you're telling the story, right? You saying absolutely brilliant and then saying... I queued for 2 hours, absolutely brilliant. The absolutely brilliant bit doesn't take away from the fact that you're queuing for 2 hours.
I got to have a nice chin wag with Mum.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
And it didn't seem like 2 hours. It probably seemed like...
Because you were having a chat.
Yeah. And then after we got out of the tent and it was hailing outside, and they took our phones.
This is like quarantine. You sure Mummy said to... you sure Mum said, actually, we're going to see The Voice, and actually what you went to was a coronavirus quarantine camp in disguise. And Tom Jones was there, and he wasn't happy because he had to wear this weird mask.
Anyway, so we went through, and it was hailing outside, so we had to run right through. Absolutely brilliant.
This absolutely brilliant trick isn't working.
Yeah, but
What you're describing right now sounds like my worst nightmare. Queuing and sitting in a tent.
And then we went in, and there was these people, and they were leading us through. And we were having a little peek behind the curtain and having a look at some of the sets, and we were standing directly behind that. You know, the giant hat with the microphone and stuff like that. And we walked round, and there was.
So you're in there. You're in the studio.
We're in now.
Any more tents involved?
We're in. This whole thing is just a giant warehouse. So it's like
a warehouse, right? Okay.
So like we go through, and there's a load of seats behind the chairs, and they're gesturing us, and they're trying to get us up there. Mum just goes, yeah.
Are they prodding you with a taser or what?
No, then they're just gesturing, and then Mum tries to go and sit down in the little side wing area, and the woman kind of gestures us away, and then another woman comes by, and she brings us around to the other side of the stage to where there's these two little pits. One's a standing pit and one's a sitting pit, and we got front row seats in the sitting pit, so we're literally next to the stage. We're literally right next to the acts as they come round.
And what were the acts like? Good?
Oh, they were good, and we got to see Tom and Ollie and Megan and Will, and they all waved at us, and it was absolutely brilliant. And we sat for like, I think we were there for 4.5 hours sitting.
Okay.
And sitting and standing, getting up and sitting down again. We got to watch these brilliant acts, and all the coaches.
It was absolutely brilliant. It was brilliant.
And it was also shiny, and lights were everywhere. And every time they said Lifeline, we went ooh.
Why Lifeline?
Because there's the Lifeline thing, and it.
Sorry, you giving away trade secret? I know everybody knows there's Lifelines.
Everyone knows there's a Lifeline. So
okay.
You know,
how are the Lifelines?
Huh?
How are the Lifelines?
We didn't see the Lifelines.
Oh, I thought you were going to say they were absolutely brilliant.
No, but they put this giant thing up on the display, and it said Lifeline, and the guy came up to us and said, every time you see that, you've got to join the rest of the crowd and go, ooh. I think it was more of a ooh. I can't do it. Anyway, well, I'm rambling again.
Are you really? It was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, we've gone into like the 12-minute mark, and I'm not even like halfway.
Well, we haven't even answered the question of the podcast yet. So we've talked Dungeons and Dragons. We've talked your trip to The Voice, which sounds more like a visit to a quarantine district of London.
Hey, I got my phone back.
Oh, yeah, they gave you your phone back. And we haven't come on to the question of the podcast, which is weird food combinations. So what weird food combinations, listeners, do you like? You can give us your answers for next week's podcast using the following methods.
Twitter, @HollerKindness. Facebook.
Absolutely brilliant.
Facebook, put it in the search bar.
Absolutely brilliant.
holler@thekindnessproject.co.uk if you want to email us.
Absolutely brilliant.
The Kindness Project in the Google bar if you want to look at our website.
And you can get access to every single...
absolutely brilliant episode we've ever released on the website.
All right, have you been drinking coffee all of a sudden or what?
No, I haven't had a single coffee today.
All right, okay. So you can do all that. What's the weirdest food combination you've ever eaten?
I once made that really weird sandwich that had the pesto sauce in it.
What? Pesto sauce in a sandwich? What else was in it?
I know. Cheese, ham. I stuck it in the microwave for a couple of seconds. I put some salsa in it. This was okay. So it was like year 7.
So you had a salsa, ham, cheese, and pesto sauce sandwich.
I think there was chicken meat. It was like year 7 summer holidays, and you and Mum were still at work, and you guys, did Charlotte, you stay at home? You have a rest day? And I got hungry for lunch, so I was like, I'll make myself a sandwich, and I opened the fridge to get like some sauce, and I saw that it was pesto and salsa, and I was like, right, going in the sandwich.
Can I say that isn't absolutely brilliant?
It's really tasty.
I don't know, my friends. We will crack on with the show.
Yes.
So, there's no interview this week because I want to talk about something quite serious.
Yes.
I was in Dublin a couple of weeks ago, and on the Saturday night I heard the news about the TV presenter Caroline Flack,
Yes.
who committed suicide at the age of 40. Now, what was a bit confusing to me was, I'm 42, so she wasn't that much younger than me. I look at my life and think that I've got an amazing amount to live for, and I look at somebody like that and think how much mental anguish must she have been going through to actually put her through that, to make that decision. And you know what, it was an interesting one because one of the things that she tweeted out just before she committed suicide, a couple of weeks before she committed suicide, because she was getting so much online abuse, was just be kind. So she talked quite a lot about kindness. But I think part of kindness, and something we don't talk about enough, is just being kind to yourself, just making sure that you are in a position where whilst helping other people, supporting other people, being good, you should be kind to yourself. And as you know, Charlotte, I'm thinking about this quite a lot because I'm writing a book on kindness, and I want to just share some things that I've learned over the last couple of years doing research into kindness, thinking about kindness, and talking to people who are doing amazing stuff in the world about how we can be a little bit kinder to ourselves. What do you think about that?
Oh, about being kind to ourselves. I think it's very important. I think it's one of those things where people don't see the importance of it, where especially when they're not being kind to themselves because they're kind of lost in it. And I think sometimes it does take other people to show you that you do need to be kind to yourself so that you can help be kind to other people. And I think it is something that is something you can control, but it's not something you can do alone. Because sometimes we get a bit lost in our own heads and we don't
100%.
understand that actually maybe we are worth more than we think we are.
100%.
I think being kind to oneself is a bit difficult when you can't see your own value, so it does include other people as well. You know what, 100% I agree. I mean, I think sometimes we need a reminder that we should be kind to ourselves, and that means other people being kind to us, because the reality of it is we are social beings. You know, we need that reminder, and I think sometimes our own worst enemy is that voice inside our head, and sometimes we need a reminder that voice inside our head isn't often based in fact. It's based on it's based on perception of the world, and that perception might be skewed. So I think you're absolutely right. So I think the first thing is, even though we can and we should remind ourselves that we need to be a bit kinder to ourselves, what we also need to do is just give other people the opportunity to remind them that they need to be kind to themselves, because that then then you're doing it. But let me just share some tips that I think are really important. Number one, I think saying no is really important, because sometimes that mental anguish and that mental stress is because we take too much on, and I think saying no and finding time and space
in your own head to for your own opportunity to recover is really important. Recently on the podcast we interviewed a guy called Nick Elston, who's had his challenges with anxiety and his own mental health, and he's really open and talks about this, and I've learned quite a lot from Nick about doing this, and effectively he understands now after his anxiety attack that he talks about quite openly. He found that what he needed to do is just take time out of the world, recovering and finding his own sort of space again in his own thoughts. So even though he liked being with people, saying no and setting rules and setting boundaries and not saying yes to anything, being busy all the time isn't often the best place to be, because you never get to rest mentally or physically. And
I think that being busy constantly is a short-term solution because it stops you thinking about other stuff. Like you're focused on what you're doing. You're focused, but it's kind of one of those things where you just kind of push everything back, and then there's more to deal with later on. So maybe it's not the best solution overall.
So maybe saying no and setting boundaries is quite an important thing to do. And it's weird because I like being busy. I quite like being busy, but it's also important to make sure you take time to rest. And rest in your own way, be that exercise, be that meditation, be that chilling and watching a movie, being that like spending time with friends or family. It doesn't all need to be work.
See, I think in a way exercise is kind of like work, but you say it's like calming for you and it helps you deal with your own space in the same way that writing for me does, because even though it is a form of work, it's also a form of expression, and it's also a way that I can talk about my feelings without actually talking about my feelings. It's a way of expressing myself without actually talking about myself in a way, because sometimes
I agree.
Putting it into context of myself makes it a little bit more scary, because it's like,
well, I think the other interesting thing, I think you're right, because writing allows you to express those emotions. It's a cathartic thing, right?
And I think in a way it's also because sometimes when I'm writing characters, I'm writing about myself, but I'm writing things that are true about myself, but things I never considered true about myself. It's like certain ways I'm feeling, and I don't understand them when it's in reference to me, but taken into context of someone else, it makes more sense.
Yeah, I get that. So number one is set rules for yourself to make sure that you're protecting your own headspace. Number two is avoid comparisons. Now, the interesting thing is we're all guilty as humans of comparing ourselves to others, and the reality is sometimes that drives us to achieve things we might not we might not do otherwise, and that's how it works positively. You know, you might turn around and say, my mate Steve from the gym, who's a real man. Who is a real man, Steve from the gym?
I thought it was Steve the friend.
He's Steve the friend, but he's Steve the friend from the gym. But like the reality of it is that sometimes you need that social circle pushing you on. What you don't need, and what can be destructive, is when you internally compare yourself with others and don't think you are as good. And the reality is we're all different. You know, we've all got different drives, all got different motivations.
We're all good in our own way.
We're all good and skilled and special in our own way. And thinking that I'm not as good as, or I'm not as rich as, or I'm not as successful as somebody else is nonsense. Live your own life.
Because there's always going to be someone better than you.
Well, you know what? What does better mean? What does success mean? You know, success means that you're happy, right? And if you are spending your time comparing how happy you are instead of being happy, the reality is that you're not spending your time as productively as possible. So avoiding those. You're right. People, you know, there's always going to be a wealthier person, unless you're perhaps Warren Buffett or Bill Gates. There's always going to be somebody who's faster, who's fitter, who's better looking, who's got more mates to play Dungeons and Dragons with. Whatever it is.
Some people are running 15 people campaign.
It doesn't matter. But comparisons that inspire are fine.
Yes.
Comparisons that make you feel rubbish.
Yeah, the comparisons that only serve to put you down are just...
Yeah, and again, who's guilty of making those comparisons? Us.
Yeah.
You know, we make those comparisons sometimes, but remember that they're comparisons that they want to avoid. There's a really interesting study, and I'll reference it in the show notes, by Emmons and McCulloch and Bunk, Yabima and Gibbons and Eipenberg around social comparison bias, and it talks about that paradox of sometimes comparison can drive us forward, but a lot of the times it doesn't do us any favours. That don't do us any favours. Next one is gratitude. So I think I'm an incredibly lucky man, and sometimes I think that gratitude helps me live my life in the best way possible, because I always try and start from the starting point of being super fortunate, and I think the focus on what's gone right as opposed to what's not gone so right allows me then to focus on what I need to potentially improve and not anything else. So, I mean, there's plenty that is wrong with me. I'm bald. I'm not bald yet. I'm going bald. The head hole is growing on a daily basis. I'm certainly not the quickest runner in the world. I'm not the smartest in the world. But I tell you what I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for an amazing, an absolutely fantastic family.
It's not my wording, but okay.
Absolutely brilliant family. I'm grateful that I get to do a job I love, where I get to talk to people and support them to achieve their goals. I'm grateful for living a life where I can be creative and share thoughts and ideas on this podcast. I'm living a life where I get to travel, and I get to travel with you, Charlotte. That's super important to me. If I get a bit teary, just stop me. I'm grateful. I'm so lucky. I tell you what else I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I was born in a country that gives me all this opportunity. I'm just grateful for so much. And sometimes when we're thinking about those thoughts about how bad we are or how bad our environment is, we forget how lucky we are. And I think that thinking about gratitude and doing that as a exercise is certainly worthwhile.
You know what you are good at?
What?
Posing for my photos.
Am I?
Yeah, I was just thinking, because the way the sun was shining in your face, it reminded me of an old photo that I really liked, and I was trying to mimic, but I couldn't get quite right. So I will have to be experimenting with that when we're done with recording.
Okay, fair enough. If you want to take some photos, I mean, that's fine. Okay, so next one is I as you know, I'm an atheist. I've got an interest in philosophy, and one of the philosophies that fascinates me is Stoicism.
Yes.
And that is, I mean, the Stoics believed a bunch of different things, but the one lesson that I've learnt the most of is only worrying about the stuff we can control. And again, it's one of those things like gratitude that you've got to remind yourself every day, but not worrying about things that you have no control over allows you then to say what anybody else does then has no impact on the action I'm going to take. I'm just going to carry on focusing on what I can control. I'll give you a perfect example of this. We had a conversation. You were feeling a bit rough last week, wasn't you? And we had a conversation around the fact that you'd sent a text to your friends. They didn't respond immediately. And you felt that that it said something about you because they didn't respond. Now, the reality was you'd done what you can control. You'd sent them a message, and you started inventing all these stories about what they were believing because you hadn't heard from them. And I think what helps me is that only worrying about stuff that I can do then allows me to say, whatever they want to do is up to them. I'm just going to focus on what I'm going to do. Now, we're human, right? And we care about what other people think. That's entirely natural. Having that resilience to say, all I'm going to do is focus on the elements that I can control helps me, and hopefully it will help you in the future when stuff like that happens. Next, I've got making mistakes. Now, when I look at Caroline Flack, she'd made mistakes in her life, and she was awaiting quite a serious criminal conviction because she'd assaulted, or she'd been accused of assaulting her boyfriend at the time. And it's I don't want to get into the rights and wrongs of whether she did it, whether she not, or whether she should have been convicted or not. What I would say would be part of the challenge we've got as a society is we all make mistakes, and we've all got to be bold enough and brave enough to admit that we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
And number one, admit them, and number two, realise that life goes on when you make a mistake. I don't know what was going through Caroline Flack's head when she made that decision. And there's probably thousands of contributory factors, but I'm sure one of them was the fact that she was scared that mistake was going to have a negative impact on her life moving forward for the next 40 years, and that potentially it could have done. But certainly the fact that there is like just that reminder that we all make mistakes, big and small. There is life after making mistakes, and mistakes are also about learning to be a bit better is really important. I know, like, sort of, I've been there at times when I've made mistakes in my life, and at the time in my head it felt like there wasn't any way out.
Yeah.
There's always a way out. There's always a way out. And I think we've got to sometimes make sure we've got people around us to remind us that
sometimes there's always a way out.
There's always a way forward normally. Unless it's the most extreme mistake, and even then there's normally a way forward.
Bound to be a way forward.
Yeah, and I think mistakes are important because we learn from them, don't we? But sometimes when we make a mistake, it's difficult to, because especially
see past the current consequences.
Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, it definitely is, because sometimes like you do things and all you can think about is like what's going to happen now, but in a sense that's not the most important thing. Sure, something's going to happen now, but is it going to affect you in the long term? Is it going to ruin absolutely everything? And nothing ruins absolutely everything. There's no way you can ruin absolutely everything. I mean, saying one word isn't going to tear the world apart just because it's a mistake to say that word. And in a sense, even if everything does fall apart, there's still a world for you. There's still a place where you belong. There always is going to be, even if it's halfway around the world, or I don't know, completely different language, or
You're going a bit extreme, but the reality is there's always people around you who know you. If you're a good person, which most people are, I believe, there's normally people around you there to support you and love you. I want to move on to something else as well. I want to talk about ignoring the noise. Part of the Caroline Flack's challenge was the amount of virulent hate that was directed towards her. And I don't know whether, if I was in her position, I would have been able to cope with that.
It's all about perspective, isn't it? Because like the way the media saw her was because of this one mistake she had made that she wasn't even supposed to be getting prosecuted for, and like it kind of turned them all against her and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that both social media and traditional media accentuated the mistakes that she'd made, and it wasn't a particularly pleasant environment for her to be it. But the challenge you've got is those with the most hateful message, or the message that's the most upsetting, shout the loudest. Mm-hmm. And what we've got to remember is most people, it's a really weird message, this one, but most people don't care about you. Okay, most people, all they're trying to do is they care about you, but all they're trying to do is live their lives.
Yep.
And live their lives in the best way possible. And actually, what Caroline Flack was, the position she was in was she felt that everybody was against her because of the. I'm assuming she felt that everybody was against her. I don't know what she was thinking, but like, the reality of it is, we're in a position where what we've got to do is remember that a lot of what you hear on social media, on the mainstream media, is noise. Mm-hmm. Like currently we're going through a position where the coronavirus is out there, and if you turn on the news, you'd assume that everybody in the world has got the coronavirus, and actually it's relatively, it's still serious. People are still dying from it, but it's still a relatively low risk. And
less people are dying from it than people die of the flu every year.
Yeah. So I think what we need to do sometimes with anything that's going on in our lives is just put it into an element of perspective, and make sure that we're not catastrophising things like that. And so, you're right, Charlotte, sometimes you're right, just looking inside your rainbow bottle there, you having a good time there.
I'm drinking for 3 days and there's paper in it.
But yeah, that reminder, and again I agree, sometimes it's difficult to do it yourself, that reminder that actually the world isn't a catastrophe, and 100 people on Twitter telling you that something's wrong when actually there's millions that would tell you it's right.
Most people on Twitter don't even know what they're talking about. They're just looking for an argument half the time.
Well, look, whatever you decide to do with Twitter is fine. I use Twitter for mostly positive stuff. I've stopped engaging in debate because no one has ever persuaded me on Twitter. No, I've never come off Twitter and gone, oh, you know what, those 140 or now 280 characters have really persuaded me of your nuanced view. Well done.
I don't see, I still use social media. I don't use Twitter. I don't use Facebook. I don't start debates with people. I don't use social media the way people traditionally do. I don't post pictures of my face to make others think I look pretty. I don't. See, I use Instagram because it's a convenient tool for texting and posting pictures of fandom stuff and posting my photography pictures, but whether they get likes or not, I use Tumblr because, like, I can share my opinion and nobody knows my name. Secrecy. And, like...
You're not a troll, though, are you?
No, I'm not a troll, but I post into, like, the fandom pages, and that's what I use Reddit for, but I deleted Reddit as well, and I stopped.
Yeah, look, so, the internet... and social media can be amazingly positive places, but when they're not, we've just got to put them into perspective. At What's Up, Mr. Eggman 272 isn't going to have any major impact on your life. No. Like, I don't know. I don't know whether I've picked an actual Twitter
what you egg.
at what you like. That these people, in the general scheme of things, don't matter.
I love how I gave you a genuine Shakespeare quote. You were like, yeah, there's a Twitter username. Like, I
bet there is a Twitter username.
It's a genuine Shakespeare quote.
Next is exercise, and we've talked a little bit about that. Sometimes it's just important to get out there, run, jump, walk, skip. I like
hop on 3 knees.
Yeah. What do something that just keeps you active, because exercise kicks in your endorphins and has been proven to benefit your own mental health.
Yes.
And then last one I want to talk about, growth mindset. It's one of my favourite topics, isn't it, Charlotte?
Oh, shut up about it.
And growth mindset is starting with the fact that we are incomplete creatures and we never stop learning. So being in a position where, despite where you are today, the future is always more positive, optimistic, because you get better and learn more as life goes on.
That was a very complicated, that was a very complicated and technical way of explaining it.
How would you explain it?
So it's like the growth and the closed mindset, I think, is the two different ones. Well, if you were to have a closed mindset, it would be like, I can't do a handstand. But having a growth mindset would be something along the lines of, I can't do a handstand yet.
Yeah. Everything's learnable. You know what? There's a guy at my gym. It's a really weird analogy, because it's exercise related, but he came to our gym and said, I can't do a push-up yet, and he couldn't do a push-up, and you know what he did? He did this thing where he started doing it on his stairs. So it helped him do a push-up, and then started on his knees, and then did it on the stairs, and then just slowly developed and worked your way. And that is the perfect example of somebody who's gone, I can't do it, but I've got the ability to learn, or I've got the ability to build up the strength. That sort of, or I've got the ability to learn a language, learn a new skill. I've got the ability to understand more about what makes me happy. I've got the ability to change my current situation so that I'm happier, potentially. You know, all of these things are changeable. I think sometimes the challenge when it comes to being kinder to ourselves is that we assume that state of being depressed or sad or isn't going to... Yeah.
It's the final point.
Isn't going to change. And the reality is, it's not. The only constant in our lives is change, really, and it's important to remember that. Next one is ask for help.
Yes.
And talk.
Yes.
I don't know what I'd do without you.
Oh, shucks.
And Mum.
Oh, shucks.
And Sophie. Because even though you tease me amazingly about everything, I know that if I had a problem and I came to, maybe not Sophie, no, if I came to you or Mum and I just wanted to talk about it, I know that you'd listen.
Always.
And I'd 100% do that for you. And Mum. And maybe Sophie. No, and definitely Sophie, right?
What if her problem is that she got stuck in her Henry VIII costume? Have you seen it? It's absolutely brilliant.
Oh, I love it. You know what? I almost got stuck in a monkey outfit, but that's for a different subject. But I think part of the challenge is often we don't feel we don't feel that we want to burden other people, and we should always, if we're struggling with something mentally, always ask for help. I think we've come on by leaps and bounds in recent years that actually talking about mental health isn't a stigma anymore.
It's actually beneficial to people with mental health.
But actually we can talk about some of the challenges we face. I just think it's so important that we remember that sometimes we all go through stressful situations, we all struggle, and I just think that remember that there's always somebody out there to listen. And if it's not family or friends, or you don't feel comfortable talking to family or friends about some of the challenges you're facing, you've got professional organisations out there who provide that support. So please make sure that you're using that. I'm a firm believer in the phrase "a problem shared is a problem halved." You know, talking it through can then help you understand what the solution might be, and that's really important to do. So then the last thing that I want to talk about is and something that's been proven to be a way to be kind to yourself is be kind to others. Because actually helping others does something called give you a helper's high, and that's when endorphins in your, same as exercise, endorphins kicking in your body, and helping others makes you feel a million times better. And we'll talk about that helper's high on a future podcast. What do you think of those tips? Do you think they're useful?
Yeah, definitely. I think that it is a good array of tips, because it doesn't just apply to one person, it applies to lots of people, and it applies to several different techniques and several different things you can do. And like, so if one thing doesn't work for one person, there are other things in that list that could apply to other people, because it's not just one person specific or one type of person specific.
What works for you? How do you try and...
I try and talk to my friends. I try and express my feelings through my journaling and my writing and my poetry, and sometimes I'll randomly doodle. Like, I'm not a great artist, but it does help me in a way.
But you know what? That's one tip that we didn't mention. That just being cathartic. Just
doing things that not for yourself, obviously for yourself, but not to share or to do with other people or for other people to understand. It's just something for you. Yeah,
to express your emotions on the page.
And I think in a way that's having time for yourself. So like sometimes I like to just take some time, me in a book, and I don't really think about myself. I just kind of get lost in the characters. But because I like to read books where I can relate to the characters, it's sort of like by living through their story, I'm living out my own emotions in a way that doesn't mean I have to think about them deeply and get more wound up by them. And it's kind of a cathartic thing. It's a distraction, but you're also handling your own emotions because you relate to these characters, and seeing them act in a certain way shows you how maybe you should act based on these emotions, or maybe how you shouldn't react based on these emotions. It's kind of like subconsciously picking up tips from other people who feel the same way as you do.
Yeah, fair enough. No, that sounds perfect. Okay, well, I'm glad you enjoyed that, and I thought it was an important subject to talk about, considering what's been going on with the world. Shall we crack on with the show?
Yes. 'Tis the end of another podcast.
And on last week's podcast, I asked you to help me build my playlist, because every year I have a new playlist, and I like to add songs. Both they haven't got to be songs from 2020, they can be songs from whenever, but the rule is for my playlist, I can't repeat them on a previous year's playlist. And there was a few that popped up that were amazing and made it to my playlist. Stevie Dan said, for your marathon, Keep On Running by the Spencer Davis Group. Thanks, Steve. Mike Christie said, Drops of Jupiter. Now, the problem is, Drops of Jupiter is an amazing song.
But it's been on a previous playlist.
It was on last year's playlist. On Top of the World and Amsterdam by the Imagine Dragons. John Cook said a song by Dave, who won a Brit Award recently, that did make it onto my playlist. And that album, Psychodrama, is amazing. Ian Hyton said Hanging Off Your Cloud by the Courteniers. David Forsdyke went a bit old school, but went right up your street, Charlotte. Living on a Prayer by Bon Jovi, Don't Stop Me Now by Queen, Mr. Blue Sky by ELO, Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses, Don't Stop Believing by Journey.
I'm going to be controversial. I don't think Living on a Prayer is Bon Jovi's best song.
You like It's My Life, don't you?
It's My Life. Have a Nice Day. Best two Bon Jovi songs,
Fair enough.
my opinion.
Controversial. Al McCann said, I really like the 1975 right now, or some AC/DC, which did make them onto my list. Hazel Gray said, Ain't No Mountain High Enough by Marvin Gaye and Tammy, I can't remember Tammy's surname. Sean Neil Acton said Judy Street with What? And then gave us a list. Painted Black by the Rolling Stones, Back to Black by Amy Winehouse,
Back in Black by...
The Impossible Dream by Andy Williams, Take 5 by Brooke Beck, On Days Like These by Matt Monro, London Calling by The Clash, Golden Brown by The Stranglers, Crazy by Niles Bartley, Warwick Avenue by Duffy, and A Girl from Ipanema by Astrid Gilbertero. And Justin Gaffney said, What a Man Got to Do by the Jonas Brothers.
The Jonas Brothers.
And that, my friends, was it. And that is also the end of another podcast.
Ooh.
So on that, we'll see you next time.